Hi, Solopreneur Nation. This is an uncaffeinated, overhydrated, unshowered Bo Yoder coming to you live onto interwebs. Look, if you've got this thing, this vision for what the future should be, and have the guts it takes to venture outside the matrix of normal, safe, boring mediocrity to make it real, if you've ever been called a dreamer, crazy, or obsessed, if you've ever been told it's time to stop doing what you're doing and be responsible, give up on your dreams, yet you know that what you're doing truly matters and it's your moral responsibility to make it happen so that the world can move forward out of the darkness into the light that you're working so hard to make shine, then welcome. I'm Bo Yoder, your Solopreneur survival guide, here to help people just like us learn how to best survive your glorious yet hectic period of catastrophic success so that your light sparkles bright in the darkness, because you're not crazy, you're not lazy, you're a freaking genius who's doing exactly what you were born to do, or you wouldn't be here today. You have amazing focus even though you don't know it, and amazing self-discipline even though you don't believe it right now. It's just hidden away, waiting for you to reach down and access it if you have the right structural tools. And once you get those tools in place, you can and must take this idea as far and as fast as you can, because the world desperately needs you. Welcome, everybody. This is episode 6, and today we're going to talk about eliminating distractions. So, interesting email I got the other day, and interesting because this person wrote to me and said, I love what you're doing. I love your message, but your phone was blowing up the other day on one of your podcasts, and it was super irritating. And you want to know the honest truth? I literally didn't know that happened. I literally didn't hear it. Okay, so now I want to talk to you about eliminating distractions, because right now we live in a world, and actually let me go ahead and start my 10-minute tirade here. We live in a world that is nothing but distractions. Everything is constantly coming at us, back and forth, back and forth. I think I talked in another podcast that there was studies done, I think 2005, so quite some time ago, that showed that electronic distractions, constant inputs coming into your workflow, to your life, have the same kind of a cognitive level of it drops your cognition. It literally makes you dumber. It drops your IQ. It drops your productivity to the same levels as somebody who smoked a marijuana cigarette and is literally high. And that is pretty shocking when people first hear it. But if you think about it, that's exactly what happens. You're in the flow, you're working, you're being creative, and then something happens. And of course the joke is from the Disney movie, squirrel! And that is the way our life works. We're constantly being bombarded from right, left. We have auditory. We have a visual. Things are constantly coming at us. I don't even know what the number is now, but I think I've heard that we absorb like 1,000 or 2,000 messages a day, trying to sell us something. Our brain is just oversaturated with stimulation. Now, for those of you who've ever enjoyed the outdoors, gone camping, gone hunting, when you're alone in the woods, there's not a lot of distraction. That's what our mind and our brain was intended to do. We are hunter-gatherers. We're supposed to wander around looking for the next food source. So now that we have constant stuff coming at us, our brain is not adapted to deal with this, and it causes a lot of dysfunction. Like I said, it literally makes you dumber. So if you do dumb things, if you feel like, you stumble stuff, you forget things, it might not be because of you. It might be because your brain is just saturated. It doesn't have the bandwidth to deal. What's cool about the brain, though, is you can train it and you can program it almost like a computer. And we're going to be talking about this a lot as we get into some of these other techniques. I call them brain apps. So one of the brain apps that I went through is to learn how to overcome distractions. And it came from kind of an interesting source. So what I'm going to do now is actually read to you from, I'm working on a manuscript for my next book. So I've written 2 books for McGraw-Hill on trading and finance. And I'm working on the 3rd. So I'm using the same tools and techniques that I'm talking to you about. For me, this is a tier 3 priority. So when I have a cancellation in my client schedule or some other thing that gives me a block of time, I sit down and write. And I'm a pretty good writer. I can put out 3,000 to 5,000 words in an hour. So I'm piecing it out. But there's a piece in here that I wrote about this particular thing that I thought I'd read because it makes good sense. So here we go. You can't focus on anything if you're constantly distracted. So conquering distraction and noise is the key to high performance in the world of today. Here's an example of how I use this principle in my own life. I love to play golf and became frustrated at how easily I would choke and miss a short putt if there was some startle or distracting noise right there as I was beginning my stroke, right? It's a classic problem for golfers. So I realized if I wanted to perform at my highest levels and be consistent as a putter, I needed to desensitize myself to these distractions if I was going to maintain my focus on the task at hand and perform at my highest level. Because I am a solopreneur, I was able to get to the golf course during the day when it was very quiet. Nice little side benefit, right? I would usually play by myself and would listen to music as I walked around the course. So I put my favorite music into an audio editor and randomly inserted a bunch of explosions, thunderclaps, babies crying, dogs barking, people screaming on roller coasters, etc. from a sound effects website into my playlist. And this became my putting soundtrack. So when it became time for me to go to the green, I'd put on one of these tracks at random and begin my putting ritual. So this guaranteed that I would have startling and obnoxious sounds randomly blaring out at me. In the beginning, that was really uncomfortable and distracting. But within a couple of weeks, my brain began to ignore these inputs. And I got to a place where I was absolutely bulletproof on the green. When it was my turn to putt, you could scream, you could do jumping jacks, light yourself on fire for all I care. I would not even notice. I would be totally oblivious to any shenanigans until after my putt was done. Now, little hacks like this can transform your relationship to destructive stimulus quickly and efficiently. So to close out this chapter, let's go through another homework assignment. And we'll do this together here on this podcast. Got about half my time left. Pick one destructive stimulus in your life that you would like to become oblivious to. Take a few minutes to think carefully about something in your life that triggers you in a negative or destructive manner. And this comes to me from the hate section of my 246 hate process, which we'll talk about in another podcast. Now, this could be something as simple as getting irritated at a crying baby or a barking dog, or something more complex like walking past your refrigerator at night and getting sucked into eating foods that you shouldn't. What you have to do is find the thing that triggers the behavior you'd like to become desensitized to. Then come up with a creative way to expose yourself to that trigger over and over again at random times throughout the next couple of days. Now, one of the most distracting things for me personally is the buzzing of a phone. When I'm focused on a task that requires my full attention, like writing, and I hear the buzzing of a phone, even if it's my wife's phone in the other room, it doesn't necessarily have to be my own, it totally hijacks my thinking. It's a conditioned alert response, right? The telephone rings from when you're a little kid. You know, when I was a little kid, you had phones on the wall and they ring and you run over and grab them, right? We didn't have voicemail, didn't have all these things. So that's a conditioned response deep in my brain, deep in my personality. So I wanted to decondition myself from that. So even if I hear another person's phone, it hijacks my thinking, takes me out of my creative flow, and wrecks my productivity. And then I have to take time to get back into flow. And depending on who you are, that can take 10, 15, even 25 minutes. The science is kind of all over the place. But one extreme example is it takes 25 minutes to get into that flow state. So every time the phone rings, it literally steals time from your life. That's bad. Okay. All right. Back to the book. So once I have the hijack, I have to consciously bring my focus back. So the easiest way for me to deal with this reaction to stimulus is, of course, to just turn my phone off when I need to work. But that only works for my phone over which I have control, not for any other phones in the general vicinity. So I realized in order to be highly productive and bulletproof, I needed to desensitize myself to the sound of a cell phone buzz or ring. So I found a tool that was designed to create a polite excuse to get yourself out of an awkward social situation. You basically can program this thing to call you on your cell phone, to fake a call. And you're like, oh no, Timmy's in the well. I got to go. Sorry. We'll do this another time. And you're out, right? So what I did was I scheduled this app to call me every 5, 10, or 15 minutes. And I randomly mixed up these different time frames so that the calls came unexpectedly during my work session. Now, in the beginning, just like my putting experiment, this was extraordinarily obnoxious. It was and difficult for the first couple days. But by the end of the first week of my desensitization, it was kind of magical how well my brain edited out that sound, so I barely even registered that the phone was ringing. Now, having lived in Manhattan for a number of years, I would experience the same effect when it came to sirens and city noise. When my out-of-town friends would come to visit, they would always be amazed at how I could peacefully sleep through what sounded like a bank robbery happening next door. And that's what's interesting about the way the brain works, that it's constantly measuring and contrasting what's happening in the world by contrasting with all its other inputs and experiences. So if you live in a quiet part of the world, a police siren is unusual and in extreme contrast to your normal background noise. So it's jarring and uncomfortable. In New York City, the sound of sirens are a part of your everyday life, just like birds chirping or anything else. So your brain very quickly adapts to that normal soundscape around you, and you barely even register that they exist. And this is really true. So I grew up in Maine, which is very quiet, very peaceful, very beautiful. It's where I live now. When I was in Manhattan, I was going through my Wall Street years. Of course, I'd come home to visit, especially in the summer when it's really, really beautiful here. And it would be quiet. It'd be peaceful. I'd have a great time. I'd visit with my family. I'd go on vacation. I'd go sailing, all the things that I love to do in Maine. And then I'd go back to Manhattan. And it always took 2 or 3 days for the sirens to kind of go away from your mind. Another great example of this is smell. Think about if you have a smell that's really strong, if you have that smell in the room, let's say somebody puts on perfume, a few minutes later, you really don't notice it anymore. Again, your brain gives you a very strong signal when there's a contrast. And then as that contrast becomes part of your normal life, there's no contrast anymore, and it sort of blurs and goes away. And this is throughout all of your perceptions. There are visual illusions that I'm sure you've seen, and other aspects of this, the auditory ones, like the sirens. But this is all about the way that your brain in its contrast engine works. So you can hack that. You can program that part of your brain to desensitize. And that's what was happening to me on the last podcast. I'm sitting here talking. I'm really focused on what I'm telling you. I'm focused on my goals, the outline I have in my mind for what it is I want to communicate during this short period of time we have together. And we're almost running out of time here, as I say. That takes a lot of focus. It takes a lot of energy. I can't be doing other things and make this quality content for you. So I tune it all out. I literally tuned out my phone. It's sitting right over here right now. It may have beeped during our time together here. I literally don't know. I've literally tuned out that part of my brain. Now, what's interesting is if I'm expecting a call, I don't leave my phone on silent, because if I'm expecting a call, if I have an appointment or something like that, then my brain actually is listening for that. So it's a little bit like the mother who hears her crying baby in a giant playground of other kids screaming and crying, right? So the brain is this beautiful neural net that you can use and tune and program. And once you learn some of these structures, you can do amazing things with your mind and become literally superhuman or extra human when you compare it to other people. Okay, so that's your challenge for today. Find something you'd like to desensitize yourself to so that it no longer distracts or annoys you. And I suggest finding something that derails you at work. Within a week or two, if you go through this process, you will no longer be reactive to it and will have eliminated that distraction from your life. All right, so these sorts of brain hacks are what I really love, because they allow people to get more from themselves than they thought was possible. I see more in you than you see in yourself, because I know what's in you. I know what computational power you're not using, and I want to bring that out of you. So you're not lazy. You're not crazy. It's why I always say that. You are a freaking genius. You just don't know it yet. You're doing exactly what you were born to do, or you wouldn't be here now listening to me going through this process together. You have amazing focus and self-discipline you don't even know or believe you have. And all you need to bring that out, it's hidden away, waiting for you to discover it. How to access it is just simply having the right structural tools, such as I've talked about here today. Once you do that, you can and must. You have a moral obligation to take your thing, which is so important to the world, as far and as fast as you can. Because the world desperately needs people like us. We're the ones who make a difference. We're the ones who make a better tomorrow. We're the ones who move humanity forward. So it's an obligation, a responsibility, and a great joy. My point in this whole process together is to bring out more joy, less stress, less overwhelm, and actually get back to the enjoyment of bringing your idea out into the public. So, as always, thanks for listening. If you'd like any of the show notes or resources for this episode, you can go to ssg.guide/SSG6, number 6. This is the 6th episode we've done together. You can always go to training.ssg.guide for my latest free training. So go check that out as well, and we'll see you next time.